That's the kind of interruption I love.
Huh?
That's the kind of interruption I love.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
okay. It's okay to interrupt me for that. Thanks for right, because I'm just telling Cesar, oh, I'm going to put the recording, but I have to record the class first. Otherwise, it's going to just be, it's like live, right? When we were live and together. Anyway, great to see everybody. And so for Cesar and everybody's sake, so on Monday we worked together on just kind of going through the handout, looking at the mechanics, right? We looked at an example of a research paper. We talked about the different elements that in a way you've been writing essays or you have written an essay, written, work essay, sample essays, stuff like that through the semester. And the research paper is just another version of an essay. The difference is that the research paper is using more sources. I was going to add that. So where you've been using like one or two sources to write your papers from, the research paper uses primary sources and secondary sources. So it's using different sources. So that's the research component. And mechanically, the two things that are different from it is that you'll be using MLA in-text citation. That means when you have a quote, or you have an idea that belongs to from the story, that you will give the proper citation for it. And that you would include a works cited page. So those are the mechanics of it. So so the next step now is to look at what the actual assignments are. We're going to go through them together, and you have a choice of one that is fiction based, and we talked a little bit about that one. We'll talk more in depthly about it, and that deals with looking at the Junot Diaz stories and taking a position on Junot Diaz's portrayal of women in his stories. And the second option will be looking at eroticism in poetry, right? And we've read several poems that have some erotic nature to them, like a first poem for you by Kim Adonisio, the one I like to touch your tattoos in the dark, right? When she's talking about, her lover's body, like talking about the tattoos, about tracing them. And in a way, there is something erotic about that poem, even though it is about the permanence of a relationship, even though it is about all the things that we talked about in that poem. Has imagery, has all the elements of it, but there was something about the intimacy of two people being alone, being in the dark, right? Being together, knowing another person's body, right? That had an erotic element to that poem. So that's the second option. So all of this information is in, so I'm gonna share my screen. And do you have one login? Have you guys been okay with the login? The logging in once. I totally got locked out of it today. I had to call IT. I don't know. So I found the back door, the old way to get into them. That's how I'm into Blackboard, and I keep everything now open because I was like, I have class today. I need to be able to see my classes.
I just
But
noticed that professor before the class and I forgot everything. I don't know. I don't know anything how to log in.
yeah,
Guess
no,
I'm
it's
gonna
a,
call IT. I just noticed that too, like a few minutes ago.
all right. So now it's giving me drama. I just had everything open. Keep admitting people as they come in. So let me see. Okay. So you are all okay. You're seeing everything on the computer, making sure that my internet is okay. And we go back like this, and then go forward like that. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's go to your class. As you can see, I have lots of classes. I even have my classes for next semester already up here. Here we go. This is your class. And it's okay. So we're going to go to course content. And in course content, there's the research paper. And then in here, inside the research paper, this is the packet that we went over yesterday. And then over here is a folder that says research paper assignment number 1 DS stories. So let's look at this one first. I'm going to click the assignment. So these are the instructions for the assignment. Okay, let me make it a little bigger. I'll make us smaller. Let me stop share a moment. Sorry, I have to go to, okay, make sure it's speaker view. It's for the recording, otherwise it's, okay, so research paper assignment number 1. So the instructions, you need to complete a 4-page research paper with an additionally properly formatted works cited page due Monday, November 22nd by 11:59 p.m. In addition to the articles provided, you must research one other source. Your sources can include books, and I'll explain all this, magazines or journals, encyclopedias, not Wikipedia, reference books, with newspapers, letters, interviews, lectures, blogs, etc. These are examples of what other sources are, right? The research paper must use MLA formatting, which you know, one-page margins, double space, formatting for the first page, numbered correctly, and see samples attached. But we have the samples in the handout. You must use MLA citation to properly cite your sources, right? So that's a new instruction. Remember, all sources, including short stories, must be included on your works cited page. So if you're writing these paper on Junot Diaz's stories, you have to include the articles, but you'll be pulling from, but you also have to make sure that you include the original sources, the primary sources. The stories themselves are included in the works cited page. And you must upload the research paper to Blackboard to turn it in by midnight on the due date, which is due Monday, November 22nd by 11:59 p.m. So here's the research paper assignment. So these are the mechanics. These are the instructions. Second part, the research paper assignment. Here's the research question. The Dominican American writer Junot Diaz has often been criticized for his portrayal of women. In an article in the magazine The Atlantic, writer Joe Fazla asks, how can a book's portrayal of women be praised and criticized at the same time? Junot Diaz himself has said that male writers in general suck at writing three-dimensional, fully developed female characters. So using Diaz's short stories, Alma and the Buddha Principle, write a research paper exploring the question, is Junot Diaz fair or unfair in his portrayal of women in his stories? Remember, you must form your own opinion on his portrayal of women, right? 2, you have to use both short stories as examples, Alma and the Buddha Principle. You have to select at least one of the articles that are provided, and I will show you them. And you have to find at least one other article to support your opinion, right? So repeat it from above. Your source can come from books, this other opinion, magazines, journals, encyclopedias, newspapers, letters, interviews, etc. Right? So these are the instructions. So the instructions are, you have to write a paper. So going back to the beginning, it's going to be 4 pages, right? At least, it could be more. And plus the works cited page. So you're asking how much, that's what it has to be, the minimum. Here is the due date, and then MLA, all that stuff. So what the instructions are asking you is to answer this question, take a position, right? You're going to form an argument, right? Is Junot Diaz fair or unfair in his portrayal of women in his stories? You have to form your opinion, and you have to use both of these stories, right? You're going to have, and I'm going to show you, use one article from the one I've given, and then you're going to research and find one other article. So at the very least, your paper is going to use 2 stories, Alma and the Buddha Principle, one article that I'm giving you, and a 4th article that you're going to find. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to Blackboard, and that page is listed here, both as a PDF and as a Word doc, so you have access to open it. And here are the stories, Alma, which you have in another place, and the Buddha Principle, right? And then here are some other stories by Junot Diaz. The Cheater's Guide to Love, Miss Laura, How to Date a Brown Girl, Black Girl, White Girl, or Halfie, Monstro, and Junot Diaz, Otra Vida, Otra Vez. And these are all from the New Yorker, right? So you have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other articles. So at the very least, you have to use these 2, but look at these, stories and see maybe there's another story that will help you form a strong argument to say that whether Junot is fair or unfair. So you have more stories that you can pick from. You're not required to look at these. You're required to use these 2, but you could look at these as well, and see if maybe one of these, you can add it to these 2, and that will make your argument stronger, right? Because you're talking about how he portrays women. So now, in addition, your instruction says you have to use one of these articles that is based here that I've given to you, and you have to do research for one more. So the research part I hope to get to today with the library workshop. We're going to go into library, but if we do not get to that today, we can do that on Monday, and that still gives us all the time we need to prepare you to do your research paper, and that gives you time in which to write it. So technically, from after tonight, all of you who submit your fiction essays, that's the only assignment you have up until November 22nd, right? Which is almost 2 weeks that this paper is due. So after today, you should decide which one of these two you want to do, and then you can get started. Read through the articles, the stories. In this case, we'll go over the second one afterward. So some of the articles that are provided here, if I can make this any bigger. Some of the articles that are provided are articles that talk about this, right? Here's this one, Cheating and Regret at the Forefront of Diaz's Latest, right? How Junot Diaz wrote a sexist character, but not a sexist book, right? The baseline is You Suck, Junot Diaz and Men Who Write About Women, right? And this is an interview with him, right? That where he is talking about his writing, right? And talking about how this is how you lose her. So here's a couple of articles that talk about, here's another one, Descriptive Intimacy, Narration and Machismo in the Works of Junot Diaz, right? So a lot of people have written about his work. So I picked these 4 articles and 1 podcast. And so part of your instructions, I'm going to go back to this here, is in terms of the stories go, these 2 you're required to include, right, to help support your argument, right? Here are additional stories that you can pick from, right? Because they could make your argument stronger. These are optional to add to those 2. Then the articles, right? And the articles, you have to pick one of these. Anyone, you can use a podcast instead of an article, but you have to use at least one of these. Plus, you will have to find one other article on the internet, or through, I'm going to show you the database searches that the library provides for us, that for you to find another source. So I'm gonna stop sharing and see if you have any questions on the instructions. Or any question, a thumbs up, I'm getting, okay. Or any questions about, okay. So I'll just repeat it. I know you heard it, and I know this is for the silent people. So the paper is you have to at least use 2 of the stories to support your argument. You can use more stories. You have to pick one of the articles that's in there. Plus you're going to do some research. I'm going to show you some databases on how to do some research, and then you can search for other articles, right? Inside of those, and then you would write your paper, right? So an example of how it would look, let's just say, I think that Junot Diaz is very fair in the way he portrays women. And the reason why I think he's fair is because in this article, it says this, and that article says that. And in the stories, he presented 2 characters that I felt were really well-rounded. The character of the mother in the Pura Principle, and the character of Alma in, and then boom, then you start writing your article and making your arguments and using examples from the different sources to support your position, right? Or it could take another position. So, so that's kind of like the broad strokes of it. Okay, so I'm going to pause again, and you can put your questions in the chat. Any questions? If not, I'm going to go and explain the second option. Okay, silence could be loud. This is very loud. We're like, we got it, or it's like, okay. Remember the analogy of the bus. I want you to make sure you're all on the train with the Junot Diaz one. So if you decide to do that, and if you already decided I'm going to do it, you can go la 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 while I'm reading the next one. But I suggest you listen, because it might be something that you might also be interested in. Okay, yes.
Sometimes the question will start popping once we start working on it.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But at least as long as you understand like the mechanics of what's being asked, that's a good start. So the second one, right? The research assignment number 2. So remember, you're going to pick one or the other. You're not writing 2 papers on both of these, right? So you pick one. So let's say you don't want to, the Junot Diaz one, you don't want to deal with fiction. You rather work on something that deals with poetry. This one deals with poetry. So I'm going to open it up so we can take a look at it. And the instructions will look similar to the one we just did with the Junot Diaz option, right? So in this one, same thing, 4-page paper, the instructions are the same, due November 22nd, right? In addition to the articles provided, you must research one other source. The research paper must use MLA formatting. You must, same thing, MLA citation for your works, and upload it to Blackboard by Monday, November 22nd, 11:59. So now let's look at this question. Okay, this one says, eroticism can be considered a philosophical contemplation concerning the aesthetics of sexual desire, sensuality, and romantic love. The idea is found in literature and poetry. The great poet Audre Lorde felt that there was power in the erotic, and the erotic poetry has always existed and can be traced back to the early Greek poet Sappho, she was around between 610 and 580 BC before Christ, right? So write a research paper exploring how does erotic poetry connect to the ideas of life, power, creativity, and or desire, right? So write a research paper on how does erotic poetry connect to the ideas of life, power, creativity, and or desire, right? So it could be how erotic poetry connects to life, or just by itself, or to power, or to creativity, or to desire, or it could be life and power, life and creativity, life and desire. You can mix any of those up. You can focus on one, or you can use more than one, or if you want to use all four, because you find poems that reflect to all four, you can do that. So from your own perspective on how erotic poetry connects, form your own perspective, pick one, right? Connects to one, more than one, or all of the ideas offered, life, power, creativity, or desire, or any ideas you discover. So let's say as you're doing it, you're like, I think it connects to a different way. I'm going to let you have the room to do that. So you have to use at least 3 poems from the list provided, and you may add additional poems, right? So I'm going to give you a list, and you could either use only the ones from the list, but if you find another one that you find interesting, you're welcome to do that. And you have to, again, like this one, select at least one of the articles I provide and find at least one other source to support your opinion. Okay, so the same structure, right? Different question, of course, and different piece of literature, not fiction. This is poetry. So you have to form your perspective, right? In this one, like, what are you going to form? How does erotic poetry connect to life? The sense of creativity, the sense of desire, right? And in the Junot Diaz one, you have to make a decision on whether you feel he's fair or unfair. In this case, you use the three poems from the list provided, but you can add more on your own. And you have to select one article from the ones provided and find at least one other source to support your opinion. Now, before we look at the poems and look at the rest of the assignment, this is something that is in one of the offerings inside of Blackboard here. We'll look at all the poems are here, and the articles and things follow below it. Let's see here, the articles and references. But I'm going to use one, and let me just actually let me make sure that I'm sharing sound before I go in here. Share sound. Yeah, I just fixed it. Okay, I'm back here. So hopefully you can hear it. So this is like a psychologist talking a little bit about the difference between sexuality and eroticism. So I want to just talk about that a little bit to give a little more context to this, and I hope you can hear. We're not going to see the whole thing. We're just going to see the beginning of it.
So one way to distinguish between sexuality and eroticism, which I think is actually a profound distinction, is that animals have sex, and it is the nature, it is the primary urge, it is the instinct, it is procreative. We have an erotic life. We transform sexuality, we socialize sexuality through our imagination. And the central agent of the erotic act is our creativity, our imagination, our ability to renew, our ability to anticipate, to imagine ourselves in an act in which we may have a blissful time with multiple orgasms without touching anybody, just because we can imagine ourselves in it. We can envision the act without having to actually enact it. And it is the cultivation of pleasure for its own sake. But I think modernity really narrowed the erotic into its bare sexual meaning. Whereas historically, the mystics looked at eroticism as that capacity of maintaining aliveness, vibrancy, vitality, life source, life energy. When I listen to couples complain.
So, were you able to hear her? Yes. So if you look at what she was saying, what do you think she said was the difference between basically sex and eroticism, according to that little bit of information she was giving us right at the beginning? What's the distinction she was making? My bad. And then
I think
Johnny.
that I think the distinction she was making was that sex is an act, whereas eroticism can be like a feeling that's invoked through visuals or, you know, sounds and other things.
Yes, that's one distinction that she's making. That, sorry, Gregory's in the waiting room. Yeah, so one distinction that she was making is that, you know, the difference between the act and sounds and other things. Johnny, you had your hands up, or did you put it down?
Yeah, it's like sex is like Mabel said, it's something that you're making, and the other one is pretty much something you create in your head, and you create images, and sound can make you go and think of things and create your own idea of what would you like to do or have.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, she was making this exactly like, as you said, you want like this, like the mind, the imagination, right? So she was saying basically that human beings have the capacity, right, not only to do the sexual act and feel pleasure in that way,
Create it in
but
your
we
mind.
have, right, that we can imagine it, right, and that we can experience pleasure and think about it without nobody else there. I mean, not even touching ourselves, right? Just like just thinking about it, right? That she says that we have that. And so that's what gets translated in art, right? That's what gets translated in poetry. So the way it can one of the ways it can manifest, eroticism could manifest itself, could be in poem. So I made a comparison with the first poem for you. So when we read it, of course we were talking about it. Maybe we felt like, wait, is that what's going on? They just, you know, they just, right? So, but it is that there is this idea of us, you know, of Kim Adonisio inviting you as a reader into the bed with these two people, right? And imagining and having you understand the intimacy of touching another person's tattoos in the dark, right? And this body that you know, right? So she's taking us into, so it's not necessarily like a sex act that we're doing. It is, right? It's an engagement. It's about intimacy. It's about pleasure, right? It's about, you know, there's the and in it and all the things that are involved, right? Particularly when it's good, you worry that it's going to go away, right? That it's going to end, right? It's going to stop, right? So, so that's one of the ways it looks at that. So this assignment is to kind of take a look at eroticism and say, what is it doing in the poem, right? Is it, you know, it could be, is it talking about life and life in her poem? Like if I say, so what aspects of life is her poem talking about in terms of first poem for you, if you remember it? What aspects of life?
The feeling of love and the way he sees this person, how highly his queen.
Right, okay, that's the other one, right? You can go to Pablo Neruda's one, right? Oh. That whole idea, right? You flipped it, yes. The Pablo Neruda one, you can totally say there's an element of eroticism in it, right? That whole thing, the rivers run through my body, spells shake the sky, right? It's like this idea of that. And first poem for you, it's what the eroticism connects to is the idea of permanence and fear, right? The fear of losing somebody in life. So that's what I mean when you think of life, don't think of like, you know, like this kind of amorphous, gigantic thing. Think of like, if you look at a poem, Like, what is the eroticism? What could the eroticism be connecting to? And that's what she was doing in that poem. She was touching the body, right? She was, wondering, like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to us, right? This kind of idea of wonder, this fear, right? This fear of permanence. And I think in this class, some people said, I think she wanted it to last. Maybe she wasn't sure she wanted it to last, right? So inside of this erotic moment, right, all of these feelings were coming up, right? All of these things were coming up. So let's look at some. I'm going to go back to share the screen. Yeah. So there she goes. Thank you very much for your advice and your insight. So here's several poems, right? First poem for you was in our poetry packet. 21 love poems, the floating poem. This one is in our packet, and the knowing. These three come from our packet, right? So you may have encountered them, but if not, they'll be here. The poems are not long poems. I'll look at this one. Let's just read this one, because since this poem by a writer named Dennis Cooper. And here he goes. After school, street football, 8th grade. Their jeans sparkled, cut off way above the knee, and my friends and I would watch them from my porch, books of poems lost in our laps, eyes wide as tropical fish behind our glasses, right? So they're creating a scene, right? And there's a group of people, right, watching someone else from their porch, and the ones watching have the books of poems in their laps. They're being neglected. Their eyes are wide open like tropical fish behind our glasses, right? Watching those people with their jeans that sparkled, cut off high, way above the knee, right? Their football flashed from hand to hand, tennis shoes gripped the asphalt, sweat spotlight on their strong backs. We would dream of hugging them and crouch later in weird rooms and tubs. Once their ball fell our way, so two of them came over, hands on their hips, asking us to throw it to them, which Arthur did badly, and they chased it back. One turned to yell thanks. And we dreamed of his long teeth in our necks. We wanted them to wander over, place deep, wet underarms to our lips, and then their white asses, then chose loud mouths. One day, one guy was very tired, didn't move fast enough, so a car hit him and he sprawled 50 feet away, sexy, but he was dead. Blood like lipstick. Then those great boys stood together on the sidewalk and we joined them, mixing in like one big friendship to the cops who asked if we were, and those boys were too sad to encounter. So sad to counter. We'd known his name, Tim, and how he turned to thank us nicely, but now he was under a sheet, anonymous as God, the big boys crying, spitting words, and we stunned like intellectuals get, our high voice soft as the tinkling of a chandelier on a ceiling too high to see, right? So I'll give you the shortcut with that one. So basically, it's like young people gazing at a group of boys playing basketball and thinking about them being so sexy, right? And so beautiful. And then and these are the nerds. You get the nerds, right? So they've got glasses, they're reading their poetry books, and they're watching the cute boys dance. Play the basketball. One day a ball comes by and one of them, they throw it back and they say thanks, and they're all excited because they finally had some interaction beyond gazing at them. And we know that one of them watching is a boy because it's Arthur threw the ball, right? So we don't know who the gender of the narrator, but one of them sitting there is a boy. And then this tragic thing that happens, right? That one of them gets hit by a car and is killed right there in front of all of them. So in a way, that poem, I'm giving you the shortcut. In a way, that poem is talking about this whole idea of desire, right, and death, right? The idea of the reality of of the wall, almost a separation between the jocks and the nerds, and then the wall, and the interruption of all of that by death. And there's something about death with young people that is jarring, right? Because whenever a young person dies, everybody always feels they died before their time, and etc. So in that poem, it's I'm giving you the shortcut, but I'm sure Johanni's nodding her head. Is anybody saying, Professor, I didn't see any of that in that poem? You could say that too. Because it's okay to say, what? I didn't see anybody playing basketball. I didn't see any, it's okay. I mean, and if you, all right, but if you read it, and now that I said it, if you read it, and that poem is very straightforward, I think in the sense, the way it's organized, it's very straight line. I mean, the narrative follows straight through. We're watching, they're playing, we meet them once they get killed, we're sad, right? There's a realization, right, between both of them, the nerds sitting on the stoop watching the players, and the basketball people all come together around the death of this the accidental death of this person. So and it takes a weird turn, this poem, right? You're not expecting it to end up with one of the basketball players dead, but it does. And it's something weird, right? He says the blood is like lipstick on his mouth, right? So there's a lot going on in the poem. But anyway, so that you can look through the poems and read them and feel like what they're about. And then the clip that we showed in the class that I didn't show the entire piece to is part of it as well. And is one of the, and let me share the screen. There's, and maybe I'll read one more later from the packet. I think one of you did your paper on that. So here, this was Esther Perel, we saw that. So you can listen to this is a legitimate source, and she could be talking about, what that is. There's different articles on what is eroticism, what is erotica, a brief history of eroticism. There's an anthology of poems that are erotic poems, and this is the introduction is there. And then this is the prompt mentions where's the prompt at? Here, the prompt mentions two people, mentions Sappho, which is a poet, a woman poet, and it mentions Audre Lorde. And so in the offerings, in the articles, there's this, Audre wrote The Erotic is Power. And so the text version of it is in there. So you could read the speech that she gives in a moment. It'll open. Right, so you could read the speech, and there's also a video of her talking it. You don't see her moving, but and there's a couple of other things in the poetry. So this one's, the erotic poetry is kind of broad, and so you can kind of carve your own way, but you're basically seeing how erotic poetry connects, how erotic poetry connects to life, connects to ideas, connects to power, connects to creativity. It could be how it connects to anything. You could look at each poem, and maybe one poem it connects to life in this way, another poem it connects to creativity in this way, another poem it connects to something else, desire or something like that. So like desire is meaning like the wanting, right? Desire is like wanting something. When you desire something, you want it. And sometimes there's a lot of poems, erotic poems, that deal with that, right? You could even say that Neruda's poem could be about wanting, right? Because maybe he's together with her. The ending is a poem only, when the bells ring, only you and I, can hear it. Only you and I, my love, right? So at this point, the ending could assume that maybe they're together, but it could have just been him just admiring somebody that he hopes to be with. And so in a way that could be a manifestation of desire. So the eroticism in that poem is really connecting to desire, is showing somebody desiring someone else. And in a way, in this one, there's desire as well, right? The nerds are desiring the jocks, right? So there's a way of desire. That's the way desire looks. So spent a little more time on that one, because that one's broader, and there's more flexibility. And as Johanny said, that maybe as you decide to pick something and start exploring it, the questions will come up. So even though you don't necessarily have homework between now, like a physical assignment, your homework is to start looking at these poems. It is to look at these, read these stories, because you shouldn't wait till November 20th on Saturday to start figuring out what you want to do, right? That you should take some, like when we come back on Monday, you should say, and let's do that. When we come back on Monday, why don't we say that? Let's have a discussion on what you're planning to think. That's your assignment. You do have a homework assignment. You have to pick one of them, right? So when you come back on Monday, you'll say, I think I'm going to work on this one, and these are the things I want to work on. Here are some ideas. If I decide to poetry one, I looked at these 3 poems. I think these 3 poems are interesting, and I want to write about those. So on Monday, you don't have a physical thing you have to submit to Blackboard, but you do come in prepared to talk about what research paper you want to write. Okay. All right. I'll pause. Any questions with the erotic poetry one, or with the Junot Diaz one?
When it comes to poetry, Professor, what does it looks like what if you were to compare it to life?
Well, if we go to life, meaning it could be life like physical things, it could be life questions. Like if you go to Adonisio, first poem for you, like for that, like one of the things that we deal with in life are big questions, right? Like, should I stay with this person? Should I not stay with this person? Is it permanent? Is this gonna last? So, we spend a lot of time thinking about that. I remember like when the first time I fell in love, one time I was crying in my room for like no reason, only because this might end. It did end, but you know what I mean? But the whole idea that it's gonna last forever and you're happy, right? And I remember it's crying like for like hours. I was in my room crying. And like I didn't have an argument or anything. It's just like a feeling, right?
Yeah, puppy love.
Yeah, puppy love.
I think
Yes.
the world is about to end.
Right. Yes. The world exists only because you're in love, and then if it doesn't, then the world is going to end. That's going to be the end of the world. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is to talk a little bit about doing research, right? Finding the other article. So one of the things is that one of the places that we automatically go to. So let me take a step back. So very often you will hear a phrase, right, when dealing with research and dealing with projects and assignments, that they will ask you to have work that is peer reviewed, right? Peer reviewed work, right? And so what do you think that phrase, let me write it in the chat, right? I'm going to write the phrase just so you can see what it looks like, right? Trying to type fast and I'm making every freaking mistake. I should just do it slowly, and that way it could. So look in the chat. In the chat, this is the word, peer reviewed, right? So the phrase. So peer, what does peer mean?
It means like your classmate, your colleague is
Right.
gonna review it for you.
Right. In this class, it would be your colleague, your classmate, your colleague, right? And so, and then review, that means that it has been reviewed. So sources that are peer reviewed are usually like, they could be literary sources, literary essays, they could be scientific essays, but the essay, if it is peer reviewed, that means that in order for it to be published, a group of peers, people who know something about it, right? If somebody was going to, right now, at this point of the class, you are in a way are experts as students of Charles Rice-Gonzalez. So somebody who's going to talk to you about let's talk about Charles Rice-Gonzalez. You could talk about it, right? Because you know something, you have experience, you have knowledge, you've taken class with me, you've heard me lecture, I've graded your papers, so you have knowledge about Charles Rice-Gonzalez, right? So that people can trust your opinion because you have firsthand knowledge. So when things are in a peer-reviewed, that means that the article that was written was read by people that have some knowledge about what that person is writing about, and those people say, thumbs up. We agree. And so you can trust the source. You can trust the article is saying truthful things because it was peer reviewed. Now, many things are not necessarily peer reviewed, right? So sometimes things are just an editor at a paper is the one that reviews it and puts it in there. And that editor is very knowledgeable. But sometimes I think, particularly in this day and age, it's important to understand that you have to have a sense of trust of the source of the information, right? I think one of the problems in our society is that a lot of information gets proliferated, but not vetted, right? Not like really looked at, right? So, you know, regardless of where you stand in terms of you vaccinated or not vaccinated or something like that, you know, that's your decision and it is true, right? But to think that they are unsafe, that's not true. To think that they are ineffective, that's not true either, right? We live in New York City, and one of the elements of it being effective, right? The evidence is that we were the epicenter when there was no vaccination, and part of it was because there were all kinds of people that fly in and out of the city. There's still people flying in and out of the city, and our numbers have stayed low because the base population is at least 70% vaccinated, right? So there is some correlation between those two. So I'm just saying that, you know, as you can see, I do a lot of research because I have family members that are like, I'm not doing that. I'm scared of this. I'm not, you know, pongo eso, you know, me pongo flusha, no me pongo, and I don't do this stuff. Right. So I always have to they could keep that position, but I at least try to give them the information and try to steer them to the right places so they're making decisions based on information and not just on feeling or just on fear, right? So again, I went on a tangent, but it's about like, how do you get your information so that when you put it in a paper, that you know the information you're putting forth is good. So peer reviewed is one term. So I'm spending a moment talking about it because in terms of research, you will hear that phrase. In terms of some classes, they may say that every article that you have to put into your research paper must be peer reviewed, right? They may say that. I'm not saying that in this class, right? I'm telling you the importance of it. I'm going to show you how to find peer reviewed sources. You're welcome to use them, right? The Atlantic is, you know, magazine is a magazine that is very well respected. The New York Times is very well respected, right? Those are sources of information, right? Some people don't consider those are not peer reviewed. Those are magazines or newspapers, and those are different, right? It doesn't go through a peer review process, but they are also trusted sources. So I'm saying this because a lot of times when you're going to do research, right? What's the first place you go do research? When you're going to look something up?
Internet, library.
Right. Internet, right? Google. Like most of us, anytime I want anything, I go to Google. Like I go to Google for this. Some people go to Yahoo, some people go to Bing, but everybody goes to Google. And you can get good information at Google. I'm not saying that you cannot get good information, but you have to be able to discern whether it's good, whether the source or the publication is good and valid. So Google is totally legitimate. There's something called Google Scholar, but there's a resource that you get as a college student, right? And just today I was speaking to a friend who went to, who said when he was a college student, he didn't realize all the benefits and perks that he was getting as a college student, because sometimes we don't even need them or we don't think about them. But one thing that you get is access to databases that are very expensive. You have to pay a lot of money to be able to get into these databases. And if you're not in the databases, which was sometimes what happened to me, sometimes I'm doing research and Google will tell me, here's an article, and I'll click it. But to order it, I have to pay for the article, right? Because I'm not in a special website that is vetted and have access to these articles. So sometimes I have paid it. I have paid $20, $30, $40 for an essay that I need because I'm working on something, right? I'm working on a paper, I'm working on an app, whatever, and I need that paper. And so I'll pay that. But since I started working at Ostos, and I learned this a few years after I started working here, so I was still paying them, that our Ostos library has already bought subscriptions to websites, and therefore we have access to them at no cost to us, right? So so I'm gonna say that about the website, and then I want to talk about just doing research in general, right? So let's say we use let's say we're due with let's just stick with the erotic poetry, right? Let's say we say the purpose of erotic poetry, you know, or erotic poetry in with desire or some. So those they call them keywords. So once you decide like what you want to do, let's say you can just decide the Juno Diaz one, right? So write your keywords. So you're going to write keywords like Juno Diaz, fair to women, Juno Diaz, misogyny, Juno Diaz, macho, so that you know, so that you connect some ideas, some words that help you find articles on it, right? So one thing is the source, knowing how to do the research through the database, and two is having keywords. And I'm going to show you why it's important to write down several keywords. So I'm going to share the screen. Hopefully things will work out okay. I'm going to open up a new window, go to the OSTOS website. So this is the OSTOS general website, and this is where we're talking about the login. You know, now you click that and it's one login. It doesn't work for me. I have to get IT to fix it. But there's all this stuff on here on OSTOS's website, right? In addition to getting into Blackboard or getting into CUNY First, right? If you look down here, you know, there's all this stuff about OSTOS's history. There's the library, a calendar, technology updates, there's a directory, right? You can look up courses. Sometimes they have stuff on scholarships. They're talking about vaccinations. There's all this stuff in here. But for the sake of today's class, I want to point us to the library. This tiny little tab that's almost like invisible, but you click the library, right? So if you click the library, immediately the very first page brings you to their database searching, right? And if you look at this, they have all these resources, right? On do you need help? Okay, here's something else. There is a librarian that is on call, and they, I think, work until 9 o'clock. So if we wanted to chat with a librarian right now, I could put chat now and I could speak to someone live, right? But right now we're not going to do it. We'll say no thanks. So then there's all this information on research that you can do on the archives and how do you start the research. And so some classes may give you just a question. They're not going to give you this this detailed instruction I gave you that you really, the important thing that I want you to experience with this project, just getting on a website, getting on one of these database workshops and finding an article that you can use. That is it. Not finding 10, not finding 15, just finding one. If you find 2 or 3, welcome to use more than one. But for you to find just one, so you have the experience of finding one. Now, they have several databases here, but they have OneSearch, which is, and this is like Google, but as you can see, I've done other one. So you could do Google, but this is like taking the place of Google, and this will direct you to very trusted sources. So I think here, if we do this whole thing, someone listening to my name, yeah, okay, here. So let's just do this one, right? So if you're doing search on, like if you do a search on Junot Diaz, right? Let's say I'm gonna say, let me do Junot Diaz, right? Right, and I hit search, right? Now it's searching for articles that have Junot Diaz. If you look, here we go. Over here, 3,959 articles came up just about Junot Diaz, right? So of course, you're not going to read 3,959. Maybe you do, maybe you have the time, but I don't. So, and so let me just sign. Please don't. Let me just see what happens if I. All right, good. All right, so I signed in. So now it has me signed in. Cool. So if I'm specifically thinking about women and I type Junot Diaz women, I'm going to hit, and I hit enter. It already cut it down from 3,959 to 1,733, right? And I'm just going to try other things. Let's say Junot Diaz women, let's say there. Right? Now it's gone down to 228 results. So it keeps getting smaller the more specific and the more keywords you put into the OneSearch. You can see this, right? So Asian Latino conflict, Yale Literary interviews Junot Diaz. And so let's look at some of these sources, right? So it says Ground Zeros of the New World, Geographies of Violence in Junot Diaz and Edwidge Dandacat, right? Just, you know, Edwidge Dandacat is a Haitian writer. So this is probably doing a comparison between the two of them. It's an article, right? I could see that right up here. Whoops, right? And I clicked it, so it's bringing me here. and it's peer reviewed, so it tells you right there. It's available online. We can click it online. Very often, like I said, in here, they'll give you the citation. So if you click the citation, it gives you that. Cited in this, find it. Oh, wait, that's where it exists. Here, let's see here. So it tells you the MLA citation. So it gives you the citation for the article. So it gives you a shortcut on it. And so if you decide to use it, and then it gives you a description. It says 2 writers born in the Española, Junot Diaz from and Haiti, garnered unprecedented plaudits. They got great awards, reading fiction, for them dying, the prices really their nation's hidden, in this concept. So I'm just skimming this here. Doesn't seem to talk about his position on women. So I'm like, well, that's probably not a good article for me to do. So I might do something like, oh, what if I put women, Junot Diaz, let me put women, and I'll put Alma, right? Because that's the name of his article. So still 228 results. And you look around. How about if I use the word sexist? Oh my goodness. So one thing came up. Let's see, what is this? I'm just reading through to see if there's anything in here.
Professor, what about if you put the name and then Alma instead of women? And then just Alma.
Just without sexist?
Yeah.
Okay, you got 108.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad.
Too bad. And this is how you lose her. This is how you lose her. Language and literature. So maybe let's see if there's something there. So as you can see, right? It's looking at different things, and it's not necessarily obvious here. Let me go back. Language and literature. This is something about him.
What
and
about
his-
Junot Diaz's view on women or in women?
What is that sort by relevance? What is that?
Which one are you looking at?
On the left-hand side where it says filter my result.
Yeah, so 1 second. So
Oh,
this is showing you, right, that it's sorted by relevance, like the closest, the connection it may make to her.
Would it matter how old is the information, Professor? Because I remember.
Not for this class, not for this. It's okay. Yeah, sometimes that's a good thing to say. I mean, I'll tell you about something that I had to do. Well, let's just see this article here, right? Last month. Oh, there's an article in the New York Times. So it's not that long. You can probably read it. But let me go back. Let's see. Women, I'm going to say Alma. So sometimes this is what will happen sometimes, right? That you come here she's talking about from locus classicus to locus lumpen, Junot Diaz's aurora. So I'm like, I don't know what aurora is. Let's just see what this is. Right, somebody's doing. So here we go. Short story, Aurora, right? Mythical character. In Aurora, a short story published, Juno Diaz transformed the mythical character into a contemporary woman. Aurora abandons the unspecific space of myth, is relocated to the barrio. She becomes a drag addict who, like the goddess, salutes whatever. So this is interesting. This is showing him writing about a female character. Now, Aurora is not one of the stories in there. So I might say, let me see if I could find Aurora, right? Because she might, I'm going to go to Google. Maybe I should go in there. Maybe in that they'll show us. So here, somebody marked it up, but I found the version of Aurora, right? I'm going to stop sharing. So we just saw first of all, the time it takes, right? So that's why sometimes you don't find it and there's thousands of articles. I didn't even go to the second page, right? I just kept looking on the first page and kept narrowing and getting suggestions from you to narrow it, right? So that you could take that. So it takes a little bit of time, right? And focus for you. That then you're reading the abstracts, you're saying that there's something interesting. So now there's I just discovered that this woman or this person wrote a story about him writing about a mythical character for setting her in el barrio. She's a drug addict, right? So now I'm going to look at I want to read the story and I'll be like, oh, well, professor, I'm going to read the story because I found an article that really talks about how he's portraying a woman and it really supports my position of him being very fair. Or it's very unfair because here we go, he's showing a Latina, she's a drug addict in el barrio, you know what I mean? So, I mean, again, it depends on what your position is. I'm saying that you can use the same story maybe to support either position, right? So you just saw live a little bit of what research can do, right? The activity of research. It helps you sometimes in the process of it. Maybe you've taken the position that he's unfair, and then you find this article, you're like, oh my God, well, there's actually another example of being fair. And, you know, or maybe now I'm confused and conflicted, you know, maybe he's fair sometimes, maybe he's fair not other times, you know, but let me share screen again.
But there's also, I was also looking at in the library where you can filter if you want articles or books and stuff like that. So it can narrow it down even more.
Yeah, if you want to do that, and then here's and the creatives parts. There's give you all this other stuff that's here. So maybe I'm trying to see what this is. That's going down.
Professor, when we find an article and we have interest on it, are we able to save it to go back and forth for reference when we're writing?
Yes, so that's a good question, Johanny, because sometimes when you go through all this trouble, right, and then you find like, so let me share the screen because I think there is. Just FYI, I just became intrigued in this, so I'm going to read it. So I think you could you can email it to yourself, right? You can email the article. That's one of the things you can do, right? You can download it, right? Sometimes.
Sometimes, Professor, you try to send those articles to your email, and it just give you like a link, and then you're not able to open it. It happens before in another class. Well, sometimes I don't know that case. We might have to find another way to save it. But we can download it in the computer.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I click this available online. Yeah, so this is telling you where it's at, right? So let's try clicking one of these because you checked it out. So what it just did, it said that I had to log in, and then I logged in, and here it gives us this. Okay, and then let me see. Here's one, download. All right, so just downloaded PDF. Actively scanning it. And here's the article. Okay. Let me go back. Right. So we found this here. Oh, let's go back. Found this here. Right. Here's the article. It says it's available online. So then you click it, and then it shows you these are all the places you might be able to find this article. So I just start with the first one. I can go to this one here, JSTAR, which is another one. Right. And here's the article, and it's saying download the PDF. And there's the article again, right? I'll save it to my. Okay. So we can go back and look for other articles. There's other things that may stuff like eating, theorizing irony, trauma, magical realism, and stuff like that. You might also say view of women. This is how you lose her, because that's the book that it comes from. I'm curious to see what this is about. But I'm going to stop. But that's your job, and I'm getting interested, and I want to now do research on some of these things. So you can see. So that's why I'm telling you today's Wednesday. That really don't wait till the last minute, because then you'll be stressed out. So you should pick your topic, right? You need to read through the material I've already given you. So you have to read that stuff and get through it. And then you have to find some time. And you could see like, okay, yeah, it takes time. I probably found one article, but that article is going to make me read a story that's not even in here, right? So you might find that, and that might be cool. You might read the article. You're like, oh my God, I love what he says about, what this woman writes, and it's written by a woman. I wonder what her position is and his recreation of this character. And then the story didn't seem that long, so I'm going to read that story, and you might be interested in the book. And I think the book, they probably have an electronic version. Maybe they have an electronic version of the book in the library, so you can see the different stories that are in it. And so then a similar thing would happen. Let's say we have about 12 minutes. So let me share the screen again, and let me just do a little bit of do a different search. Right. And so here we go. Allegories of desire, poetry, and eroticism. Okay, right at the beginning. Literature, exile, alternity, the new group, Ukrainian poets. Irradium, allegories of desire. Okay, that sounds like similar to that, but that's in a specific poet's work. You could also do things like appetite, anatomy, desire, in Carolyn poetry and theater, sexuality in the Goth magic lantern, desire, eroticism. So, let's just go to a second page, because I didn't go to, and this one's giving us 8,800. That's a lot, right? Yeah, it just froze. So I'm just going to the library again. Okay, here's eroticism and poetry, right? you do something broad like that, $17,000, right? So I'm going to say eroticism and poetry and hymn. All right, so now we'll see there's a poem called Knowledge, right? That seems to be coming up. Susie Gets Organized, that seems like another one. But let me see, let me just put only 3, but this one's coming up here, so let me just see. And I would go to the same thing. What's available online? And seeing if it gives me any more information. No. Well, I might just, let me just open it and see what I get. So Knowledge is 23 poem, indeed, free verse. Horrors of modern life are limited some way to tragedies. So it doesn't seem to have a direct connection to eroticism. So I might go back and say it's not gonna work. Right. Let me take this out. Right. Let me try another. The second poet was by, I'm just showing you different ways you might be able to do research from topics. It's just not clearing it. So now it's giving it Dennis Cooper. I'm going to say poetry. Let me try a different poet. What I didn't read today. All these other stuff keeps coming up, which makes it's interesting. This is why I say you can also pick a different poem. You know, like if you read about something like, I don't know, this queer ecology, sex, nature. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in that one. Um, As you can see, sometimes you gotta just get out of it, because sometimes it started just giving me the same things over and over again. Trying to think of somebody. Okay, there's something with Poetry Lord, body, and the book Writings on Poetry and Sexuality. So you get women as myth and metaphor in Latin American literature, Ovid's erotic poems, and Never Know the Joy, the sex and erotic in English poetry. All right, so you're getting more stuff. I just put erotic and poetry in women, and look at that, there's still 37,000, right? You could say women, you can say maybe women, Black women, maybe it might narrow it down. 17,000, right? Isn't this counter-revolutionary discourse and silence on the erotic poetry of Nikki Giovanni? She has work in our thing. So we're almost out of time. Well, we're past. Okay, we're done. But I wanted to do that so you could see that you can go into a wormhole of research and finding things. You do have to just find one article, but you could do that. You could also, you're welcome to use Google, but it's important for you to be able to see the databases that are available and the level of articles that you can get, that you're able to download them, that you can save them, save a couple of them. I suggest creating a folder saying my research, articles, and you can download them and put them all in the same article, so they're not living in your downloaded file, and then you can't find them after you spend, an hour or 2 or 3 researching and trying to find the right articles to support your position. Okay. So I know we went past time by 2 minutes, but we got done. I think we got a lot done so that you could even start, working on your stuff right away, right? And come in with your questions on Monday. All right, I'll pause. How are you doing?
A lot of information, but it's all clear. We just need a lot of time for those research. It needs time.
Yeah.
So, but it's understood, like it's clear.
Okay, good.
We just got it body hard.
Yeah. So we have class. Oh, I'm going to tell you something else, just a little bit of information. I'll repeat it on Monday. So we'll do this on Monday. We'll go over all of this stuff again. We'll have discussions on what projects you want to do, how, the angles you want to do it. If any of you start venturing into doing research, maybe you can come back to class and say, I found this article, I'm interested in this, or I spent 2 hours and I didn't find anything. I have 5 articles, I have to read them. So we'll have a discussion of what your activity has been. But next week on Wednesday, there will be a special lesson. So let me, I gave you enough information. It's after class. On Monday, I'll talk about next week, Wednesday. So let's just leave it at that. So have a good weekend.
Yeah. Hi, Professor. I wanted
Thanks,
to ask you-
Professor. You too.
I will hang out here to answer any questions, but if you don't have questions or you don't want to hear other people's questions, you're welcome to go have dinner or go to sleep or do whatever you're going to do when you click off the camera. So thank you for your time and attention. And I know Gregory has a question, and if anybody else has questions, you're welcome to stay and listen or welcome to stay and ask. So Gregory.
Yeah, quick question. The revised essay. I didn't get a feedback.
Yeah, I haven't done. I'm gonna do feedback for your class and my other classes between now and like Monday. I'll do all my work. I've just been bouncing around a lot, and so this week I'll just be home grading your papers.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. Good night,
I
everyone.
have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Good night,
Professor, for the
Professor. Good night,
research,
everyone.
can we use like a song?
Yeah,
Okay.
you could use any other source. You could use one other source, but you could use a song for sure. That's valid. If it's supporting your position, yeah,
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, Nydia, take care.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night. Bye, guys.
Okay,
Have a good
Magdalene,
weekend.
take care. You have a good weekend too.
Thanks, you too. Thanks.
Good night.
Take care.
I have a question, Professor.
Sure.
My essay is too long. I have 6 pages almost.
Are they 6 good pages?
I hope so.
Okay. Well, one of the ways to think about if you're focused enough is to make sure that to look at your thesis, to make sure your thesis is clear and that you're following your thesis as closely as possible. That helps you tighten and edit, because sometimes when, we veer from the thesis, that's one. And another thing to think about with the paper is that to just beware. You don't have this problem. Like sometimes students have a problem where they repeat things, and sometimes it makes the paper longer. So just
First one
be-
I did, I even went to the writing center, and she told me I did have a lot of repetition, and I,
Mhm.
cut a lot
cut
of
it out,
things.
right? So then
But
think
this
about
time
that.
I don't think I have, because I did fix it a lot. It's just so long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you feel, I think don't worry about it being too long, right? Because just that's why I say just make sure if there's 6 good pages, if you feel like
I
this is
probably,
good.
and I there was part of the that I added from the one that we did in class.
Mhm.
I one paragraph from that one just because I felt that that was important and I wanted to. So I kind of copy and paste that part. So should I do that or not? Even
That's
though it
fine. I
was
mean,
created by me.
yeah, it's your own work. I mean, that's what the assignments that I gave you are almost like, the psychology, at least the thinking behind my head, is that it's giving you the beginning of doing one of your papers. So when I'm asking you to write 2 paragraphs on theme for a particular story, if I'm asking you to write about symbolism with a story, and you decide to do your full paper on symbolism, you've almost got like a paragraph, at least done some thinking to develop the essay. So it's fine.
And another question I had was about, so when you're looking for a source, does it has to be specifically on the poem that I'm working on, or it could be about something related to what I'm going to be talking in that?
It could be something related, like for instance, like that.
And find just on that and then compare it into the poem.
Exactly. Like that video we started watching, she doesn't talk about poetry. She's talking about the idea of what eroticism is, right? So as you're constructing your paper, you're going to use, it may not only be about that, it might be how eroticism relates to desire, or eroticism relates to, and that one she talks about relationships, right? And I said, I use that one because many of them, like the 21 love poems, the Adrienne Rich one, it's about a relationship. Pablo Neruda, it's about a relationship. Kim Adenizio, it's about a relationship. So that you can say, psychologists say this about relationships, and this is the way it looks in the poem, right? So that the idea of the outside source validates what's happening inside the poem, your observation of it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Professor.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
All right, have a good night.
Professor,
Yes.
I still have a lot of problem with the how to turn the assignment. You showed me last time, but it's not opening.
All right, then at the very least, email it to me, right? But send me a note, say I emailed it, because then I could upload it. There's a way I can do it if you're having that much trouble. If it's not opening for you, I can upload it.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't see the other grade. I didn't see it. I don't know.
Which one?
The one I sent through the email and the other stuff.
Which one, for the poetry you're talking about?
The New York, yeah. All my work, I never see the grade. When I go to the Blackboard, I don't see them.
Oh yeah, there's no grade on the Blackboard. If you want, what I grade your papers, now when you grade this paper, you're going to go to Turnitin to see the grade. But the poetry essay that I graded, I emailed you the graded paper.
But I didn't see it.
So take a look. I'm going to take a look too. And by tomorrow at noon, either let's communicate.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Tomorrow is a holiday. You're going to be available?
Yeah, I'm just saying by email. We're emailing each other.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Timur or Adama?
Oh no.
My problem is to complete the 3 pages. He said, Lord,
Oh.
take me a lot to write something in English.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sometimes I write in French and I translate it in English.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I have to look at the word if it's the appropriate word or no.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
sometimes the translation is not very, it's not make sense sometimes the word you.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, Professor, good night.
All right. Take care. Take care. Have a good night.